have a plan. There's clearly maybe something there beyond the realm of man. Until we've thoroughly tested every last close-chested view, I find the more we think we know, the less we really do. Where would we be without THC? Cause we know they're lying to us, just don't know to what degree. Where would we be without THC? The Higher Side Chat Show, Greg Carlwood and company.
Strap in for another wild ride through the vast and choppy conspiracy. From the Sunshine State, I'm Greg Carlwood, and in the great pie chart of life, computer technology and digital engagement are getting an ever-growing slice, with little left over for whatever it is people used to do before the algorithmically selected everything, full-blown AI interactive relationships and total life management took over. We've always known these systems were psychologically manipulative, dopamine-dripping marketing machines, yet our warm, deep embrace has not loosened in the slightest. Of course, good comes with the bad, and podcasting has often been called the dark horse, a new decentralized information medium, often considered a free speech protocol that is notoriously hard to fully compromise. But is it fulfilling the promise if it's funded by sponsorship ad money from the very people and companies well established within the big control scheme? Has the full power and potential of podcasting been nerfed by flooding the zone with well-connected and compromised platforms, disingenuous narrative-seeding guests, and the vulnerability of advertising revenue models? Well, we know the big machine would never leave anything to chance because, as today's guest 7Cs says, they've been building this system longer than any of us have been alive. If you're unfamiliar, 7Cs is a great researcher and host of This Week on the Web on Iconic, as well as Lies and Ties in the Deep Web Pod. He's gotten a lot of social media attention for his highly detailed diagrams laying out exactly who is connected to who and how. He's often focused on big tech, but also within that, the ad funding behind so-called free and independent alt-media podcasting. I have found his depth of knowledge really impressive and look forward to getting into it. The deep-diving dot connector, conspiratorial tapestry curator, and big tech mega critic, 7Cs, welcome to the Higher Side.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. And what an introduction, man. That's probably the longest string of compliments I've gotten in recent memory.
Happy to hear it.
I appreciate that.
Then I've done my job. And thanks for doing this. This is going to be great. You cover a lot of information that gets beyond the same old stuff, tons of detail. This interview really came about because I saw your web of podcasting sponsors, largely about Rogan, but these sponsors go all throughout podcasting, and I just had to jump on it. I don't really want to be too hard on podcasters who take ad money because it is so hard to make it doing anything else, but it's the line that bothers me. When you hear the same script read like a personal testimony and how willing a lot of podcasts seem to be to take money from places they haven't really vetted at all, they just take the money and read the lines, and that's a big problem to me. Though the numbers are in and most audiences don't care, but I'm glad you looked into it like you have. To get this rolling, what brought this on? What are your thoughts on there being a new media establishment in podcasting that functions pretty much like legacy media despite its presentation?
Yeah, I think I think in a way it's not only mirroring sort of what we saw with legacy media. I'm sure you remember those clips of like the Sinclair Media Group where all of the local stations, I'll put local in quotes, where they were all repeating like virtually the same thing, and they had them all like line up in a grid. And I think we're seeing largely the same thing. Where I see it as sort of more dangerous is that it has courted trust a lot more. So where legacy media was sort of parading around behind this, large industry money and establishment influence and things like that. It seems like the veneer of trust is still very fresh on podcasters and influencers. I mean, I can't think for the life of me, can't think of anybody that watches Tim Pool, but Tim Pool gets hundreds of thousands of views every week. And obviously with that comes a lot of time, money, ad space, attention, and taking people's eyes off of actual developments and news and things that are happening that are affecting them. And I think it's largely problematic in the sense that not only are they selling these narratives, but they're also selling these products and services to people that are connected to very nefarious things based on just everything that I've seen. So it's sort of like a two-part in the sense that they're still duping people, often worse, and also taking advantage of that trust, not only from a political aspect, but a financial one as well.
Yeah, and that's the part that I think a lot of people aren't super clear on, the connection between the products and the narratives, because the general consensus about this stuff is that those two things are separate. And I know that I've never liked marketing and advertising. So to me, I watch a lot of podcasts and there's like this wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Hey, I have to read this thing. Who cares about it? I don't even care if you buy the product. And that is there. That is the approach that some shows take. But to say it's totally disconnected, I mean, it's kind of a case by case basis. And I know you've used the term the Rumble influencer pipeline, and I like that because you have YouTube, and then there's a lot of things you can't say on YouTube, and then all those people jump over to Rumble. But Rumble has some interesting seed money involved, and it seems like a kind of a counter narrative space that is also highly controlled. So I don't know of anyone who's been kicked off Rumble, but you can definitely promote certain people, use the algorithm to get certain shows to the top. And when we're talking about people like Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, that to me is so obvious. There's millions of dollars involved in that network. But you also talk about a lot of people that are more independent, or I would be surprised get roped in. And I don't really want to throw anyone under the bus, but talk to us a little bit about just that term, the Rumble influencer pipeline, what you think about Rumble, why we shouldn't just automatically give our trust to someone because they've been kicked off YouTube, because it seems like there's a counter place where they can seed certain narratives.
Yeah, absolutely. So it shouldn't be any secret that Rumble is being funded by people like Peter Thiel and Howard Lutnick helped get them through their IPO. You have people like JD Vance, Vivek Ramaswamy, I believe, and I could be mistaken here, but Bill Ackman is also donated. So it's not like, Rumble was just something made in someone's garage, which that trope is also, sort of an op in and of itself. but what are you going to do? But a lot of people, I think, see Rumble as sort of like this independent alternative platform from YouTube. And really, it just seems like we just have Democrat versus Republican with video platforms these days. And I would say that with Rumble, I mean, it's obvious, like a lot of the people from Night Media and the Google space and the left space have sort of taken over dominance of YouTube. But over on Rumble, I would press people to try to find somebody on the homepage or the front page that isn't sponsored by like 1775 Coffee or the Wellness Company or Zelenko Labs or something to that degree.
Fair enough. Yeah, those are some names I had here in my notes. And just to quote your post on this, influencers are being paid to lie to you by seedy companies they pawn off as sponsors. In this investigation, we explore a few of them, who is running the companies, and the people who have taken money from them. And there it is. So you mentioned the Wellness Company, 1775 Coffee. What are some of the companies that give you pause? What are the biggest red flags in the podcasting space that any podcast listener would probably recognize because they're the same couple dozen companies across all the shows?
Yeah. So I would say the biggest one that is a red flag to me is going to be the Wellness Company, or anything that falls under the Coulson Capital umbrella. You can actually go to coulsoncapital.com and see like their list of brands. They have that. They have Zelenko Labs. They have the Wellness, or they have 1775 Coffee, Unjected, that dating site or whatever. Be Loud. There's so many. And they're constantly adding more and more. They even have this company called NanoBioSim, which is sort of like a nanotech company that employs this lady from DARPA. Some scary stuff, man. And the reason why the Wellness Company and the Coulson Capital thing really sort of throws off red flags is there's this lady named Polly St. George on Twitter who
Amazing Polly.
Yeah.
We've talked
Polly.
a time or two. I've tried to get her to come here, and she's yet to take me up on the offer, but it's out there now.
I hear you, man. Yeah, she's great. She sort of, I guess, laid a lot of the groundwork to help me understand a lot of these things. And then once I sort of knew what to look for, I was like, okay, let's just go see everybody that is sort of associated with these brands. But what she found in her digging, and what I've sort of been able to reinforce through my like vetting and personal investigation, was that Coulson Capital is basically tied to Blackwater, or what was Blackwater, through this guy named David Lopez. So David Lopez sat on the board of this thing called International Health Brands that rolled up to Coulson Capital. And he was basically a special projects manager for Blackwater. So everything that rolled through him was somewhat sort of getting shared with Eric Prince and his whole network. Obviously, Eric Prince helped train people like James O'Keefe, and he's wrapped up with the NSO group through his like unplugged phone company. There was the Nisor Square massacre. But there's a lot of associations that are sort of going on that sort of tie to Prince and Michael Flynn that come through these networks. And that's where you start to get like Apollo Global Management, which is like the Leon Black, Mark Rowan, Josh Harris, sort of realignment of Drexel Burnham Lambert. Flynn is wrapped up with like OSY Technologies, which is another offshoot of the NSO group. So you're just getting like Israel spyware in that. And then, everyone that's sort of promoting that is helping to funnel money into that pipeline, basically.
Yeah, Coulson Capital, that is the company that I've been looking deeper into because of all this. Robert Langer, you mentioned, co-founder of Moderna, funded by Peter Thiel, worked with David Koch, and has done business with Pfizer, Johnson & Johnson, Eli Lilly, went to MIT, defended the donations by Epstein. Then you got the third in command at Microsoft. Yeah, another guy from JP Morgan. And making front companies is a game as old as time, or at least as old as the CIA. And a lot of people just probably don't expect that something as mundane as a coffee company is going to be connected to this. But they are funding the podcasters. Obviously, they're in the green or they wouldn't do it anymore. The podcast listeners are using that trust, buying these products, and the money is being funneled into technocracy, the very thing that is probably the scariest thing that we have to deal with in the next decade or two.
Yeah. Yeah, it's tough too, because you see it sometimes. Like I think that Sodagate thing was sort of a little peek into it, where you had all those people that were tweeting the same things at the same time. But I would encourage people to go look for their favorite podcaster or influencer, go see if they're with the wellness company, or go just see who their sponsors are and go look at like a list of their sponsors, see the companies that own those sponsors, where they've donated and things like that, because it's a well-oiled machine. And in the past like 10 years that they've been setting this up, it seems to be running pretty smoothly.
Yeah, I would say so. And one of the ones that always bothered me, well, a couple, it bothers me that these podcasters would sell dick pills and hair pills, just any pharmaceutical that you don't know how it's going to affect other parts of the body down the line. Are you giving your listeners cancer? You don't know. And what's the price for giving out that trust? It seems pretty low. But BetterHelp is also kind of in that realm, because I've talked to guests about just the therapy pipeline and how it seems pretty harmless, but you start talking to a therapist, they start recommending this pill or that pill, and now you're on SSRIs, and your whole life can unravel that way. It gets really crazy. I don't think it's appropriate to just willy-nilly be like, oh, just, it's almost like, breadcrumbs to really wrecking someone's brain chemistry. It's not helpful. And as you say, BetterHelp was eventually acquired by Teladoc in 2015, and they contributed to contact tracing efforts in 2020, provided near real-time surveillance data directly to the CDC. So careful who you're giving your data to.
Yeah. And with BetterHelp too, I believe Alon Matis was running it, and it operates out of Israel. I mean, he's a millionaire Israeli.
Yeah, gotta worry about the millionaires. And Israeli tech in general seems to be super aggressive and super advanced at compromising many different systems. I interviewed someone about the Talpiot program a couple of years ago, where they gave the US a bunch of infrastructure technology that now runs some water systems and electrical grids of major cities, maybe the streetlights and all that. Just infrastructure stuff. And then you have Netanyahu making comments like, oh, that money's always going to come. We got it. Don't worry about it. And it's like, this is very close to blackmail. I mean, on a basic level, every country should kind of take care of its critical infrastructure itself. I mean, we're obviously way far away from that with all the stuff that gets manufactured in China and then sent over here. But on a base level, I mean, come on, we really should let that be kind of a fundamental thing that is a priority, is maintaining our own infrastructure, but not these days.
Yeah, I mean, just looking at the way Israel treats Palestine's infrastructure, I mean, that very well could be us, in the near future.
Troubled times we're in. So ExpressVPN is another one. You hear it on so many YouTube shows, and you have said that it's owned by Cape Technologies, another Israeli-based tech company, but they used to run malware and adware under the name Crossrider, and also own CyberGhost, Private Internet Access, and ZenMate. I don't know much about those other companies, but Cape Technologies used to run malware and adware?
Yeah. Huh. Yeah, and essentially what they would do is they would infect people's computers and then use that as like ways to advertise, or use like ransomware or something like that to try to get people to say, you need to have a VPN, you're going to all these insecure connections, or you need to buy our antivirus software, or whatever that looks like.
Yeah, they said McAfee used to do something like that. I don't want to believe it, because I kind of liked John McAfee a little bit. He had some weird habits in the bedroom, I hear, but nothing super untoward, just gross. But yeah, it's like another story as old as time. Like, you sell the solution to a problem, and if the problem isn't there, you hype up the problem, so people need your solution. So it seems that's another one of those things. And ExpressVPN, so ubiquitous across the whole landscape, and how many people know that? And I know a lot of podcasters are just ignorant of this stuff. They're not really looking into it. They're not necessarily guilty by association, but it's just the way that this whole alternative independent media has latched onto the ad model. That's what's compromised. That's your income. They know where to hurt you, how to hurt you. And, you got to be a little more guarded about this stuff. I've spent a lot of money and mental anguish trying to stay where I am in this space without any outside influence. It's hard to do, but it's because I didn't want to make a mistake like this.
Yeah.
I wanted to be able to have these conversations. How many shows can you not go on?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's tough because, like you said, it creates this like infrastructure where institutionally you have to be funded. Otherwise you just get drowned out. But you want to stick to your principles, and you have all these people that don't do the due diligence. I would expect at the very least, like the politically centered podcasters would maybe investigate these things and make sure that they're on the up and up. But it seems like just with our politicians that they're just like, just give me the money. I don't care where it's coming from. Tell me what I have to say, and we'll call it there.
Yeah. And so when we're talking about the political podcasts, these things are a little more obvious, but we could talk about comedy podcasters too. So this is where my professional and personal interests overlap quite a bit, but you start going down the list of the biggest comedy podcasters, and there's just something interesting about their parents, basically their father's job. And again, we don't get to pick the skin we're born into. We don't get to pick the family we're born into. It can't be a scarlet letter on you forever that your dad was an international banker, because you have to be able to make your own life. And, not always are these things connected, but they sometimes are. And Theo Von's father was a Polish aristocrat, Ronald von Kurtanowski Sr., and reportedly chairman of the Un-American Activities Committee for the U.S. Senate, and editor of a Latin American report for the New Orleans newspaper, and he propagandized on behalf of the Contras in the 80s. And Theo also had a half-brother who worked for Texas Instruments and died in a shooting incident right after apparently selling a lot of stock and getting accused of running a charity called the Tipitinas Foundation as a Ponzi scheme. So that's interesting. But in this case, his dad owned a newspaper to influence narratives. And now he's interviewing the president. I mean, it's kind of interesting. Bert Kreischer's father owns a law firm. Tom Segura's father is a banking executive. Brendan Schwab's father is apparently an early tech CEO. Brian Callen, a lot of people give him shit because his father is an international banker and member of the CFR, and he's always talking politics. He's always shitting on conspiracy. He does a show with Sam Tripoli where Sam throws out the crazy conspiracy and Brian Callen explains why it's wrong. It's like, that's what a CFR member would do. So again, you know, how guilty are the sons for the sins of the father? I don't know. But when Dave McGowan writes a book about how all these 60s counterculture musical artists were the sons and daughters of military intelligence, we look at that and we say, very curious. And I think we should probably look at some of this the same way.
Yeah, it's Laurel Canyon 2.0.
There you go. You know.
Absolutely.
So another thing you've picked apart is Jordan Peterson's Alliance for Responsible Citizenship, the ARC network. I don't know much about this. I stopped listening to him a while ago, but talk about this.
Yeah, so I was basically digging into people like Michael Schellenberger and Trevor Fitzgibbon, like PR guys for the left for the longest time. And I stumbled on something called the University of Austin, which is sort of where, there's a lot of overlap with ARC is sort of what he calls it. And the way that it was explained to me when it was introduced to me was this is sort of like the alt-right little brother of the WEF. So they're not nearly as influential as the WEF, not nearly as establishment, but that they are pushing both biotech and like Christian nationalism behind this conservative veneer. And it's got a few influential people in it. Mike Johnson is a part of it, the speaker. We have Vivek Ramaswamy, Niall Ferguson. You have Arthur C. Brooks, who was part of Opus Dei and comes from the Rand Corporation. He studied at the Rand School of Public Policy.
Okay.
You have Australian Prime Minister or former Prime Minister John Howard, who was meeting with George W. Bush the week of 9/11. And he's part of a bunch of parties and stuff, is part of this thing called the Coalition with Tony Abbott. You have, there's so many people that are involved. Joe Lonsdale is a part of that University of Austin. You have people like Barry Weiss that stem off of her. Pete Boghossian, who's wrapped up with people like Michael Schellenberger, and Richard Dawkins, oddly enough, is on here. Larry Summers from the Epstein Network. I mean, there's the list just ends up going on and on. But essentially what they're doing is they're setting up like networks of think tanks, and I'm sure you've heard of the Manhattan Institute. There's like the Hudson Institute and the Breakthrough Institute and all these different institutes that are basically manufacturing consensus. So they're saying that, people are worried about this specific thing, or people want this specific thing, or there's this issue that's going on. They'll have people post about it or tweet about it and get the conversation going. And then that in turn convinces the public that politicians need to do something about this problem. And that's what all these people are sort of responsible for, is going and setting up their own networks to funnel, ideas and public opinion into this same funnel and get these objectives done.
Right on. So to stick the landing for people listening who are probably listening to all these other shows that we're talking about, and they might think, well, I listened to Flagrant or I listened to Theo Von, and I don't get the sense that there's any particular narrative being shoved in my face compared to the Daily Wire or something like that, that's more overtly political. What would you say to that? What are the ideas that they're trying to seed, or the subject matter maybe that they're just avoiding? Maybe that's half the game, is just don't talk about technocracy.
Yeah. Yeah. It seems that technocracy is like the biggest common thread. I think that somewhere probably a couple of years ago, they realized that they were far enough along on the technocratic agenda that they decided that the Israel-Palestine thing would be okay to talk about. And now you're slowly starting to see people like Tucker Carlson is pretending, in my opinion, to come out against Israel. You have Theo Vaughn, for example, who is sitting there and vilifying Israel and crying over Palestinians, and then 2 days ago was at lunch with Jared Kushner in Florida and speaking in Qatar for Trump. And it just seems like they will speak to certain people's biases, kind of tell them exactly what they want to hear on one thing. And then, if not directly support or associate with the other side of whatever they're claiming to support, they will sort of split people. So they'll say, I'm with you guys on being against Israel, but we should definitely agree with these people on this other thing. So, for instance, Theo may agree with Trump on like immigration or the prison reform or, warfare somewhere else. And then he's courting essentially the anti-Israel people over to support these other things. So they'll have varying degrees of opinions on things and get people with one thing and endear them and court that trust, and then try to use that to manufacture them into the other pieces of the agenda.
Interesting. Yeah, that does jive with how the game seems to have always been played. You'll have different tiers of importance on certain narratives and issues. And if you're not getting traction and people are getting skeptical and aren't trusting a certain source, well, you might throw them the level 2 or level 3 narrative to build that trust, to be like, oh, well, the government and the media are lying to you about this, and I'm now on your page, because there's a higher priority that is the real name of the game. So I'm with you there. And you also did a Substack on Alex Jones, I believe. I saw you promoting that it was going to happen. I didn't really come across it, but you mentioned he has a shady web of connections to people like Jerome Corsi and Roger Stone. Roger Stone I kind of know because I think he's just been on the show. But Roger Stone has a wild background and a big-ass Nixon tattoo. Just a real wild man, but not an innocent person at all, and not someone to be taken lightly. But what are your thoughts on Alex Jones? Because before the podcasting game, he was really the only game in town, and he also had this like crazy giant mansion and so many things about him I am skeptical of, but yet I can't help but also have a little bit of a soft spot for him, because I did kind of cut my teeth on Alex Jones a little bit. When I was searching for something, I was glad he was there.
Yeah. I mean, I remember the late 2000s, early 2010s when, I was still younger and seeing things like Alex Jones go to Bohemian Grove and Alex Jones expose this and talk about the Hillary Clinton cabal. And I was like, yes, finally there's a guy. And then just slowly, as I've like gotten older and done some more research and stuff, like I think of like Aldous Huxley and how he did Brave New World, and then Julian Huxley was part of the eugenicists, and how there seems to be like they always need a guy that's the revelation of the method guy. And I want to think that Alex Jones is not that guy, but as time has sort of gone on, especially post like the Sandy Hook lawsuit and things like that, that it just seems like he just 180 somewhere. And I don't know if that's like, okay, we're finally far enough along, like with the technocracy thing in Israel, where they can say, okay, it's time to drop the charade, or if it's sort of like a humiliation ritual for him, or what it may be. But I mean, it's so obvious now that he's clearly on the side of the government and the institutions. I've been doing some digging into some of his earlier sponsors. I know that he's worked a little bit with people from the wellness company, and I believe he even had Vladimir Zelenko from Zelenko Labs on He was pushing the ivermectin thing and the hydroxychloroquine thing, and everything like that during COVID. And I don't know, it seems like if he wasn't always like Bill Cooper said he was, then he definitely got captured somewhere along the way. And I think someone ended up paying off his lawsuit or something. And they're basically just telling him what to do at this point.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somebody that I trust once was referring to a different person in alt media and used the term discarded Rockefeller asset. And I think that might apply to Alex Jones in a sense, because pre-internet, he was the controlled opposition. I've said this a bunch of times, but his general tone, his attitude, his anger, that creates an archetype of what a conspiracy person is like. And it also just creates this perception of, don't go down those rabbit holes because you end up like this. And it seems crazy and unhinged. And then also he would go on The View and stuff and go on Piers Morgan. And so those shows got to have credibility because they looked like they talked to both sides. They talked to everybody. But the guy you have as the figurehead for that talks crazy, and everybody stares at him and the veins popping out of his neck. And like, it just doesn't look like that's a good way to be. It doesn't look like that material is going to serve you well. But then when podcasting happened, I really think that he reinvented himself as just a good time guy. He's drinking with Rogan and crew. He's going on Flagrant, having a good time. And that really humanized him in a big way. But the Sandy Hook thing, I am curious how much of that you think was theater, because I had stopped listening to him way before then. And he's on the air so much, saying so many things that there's no way I'm going to be able to see and hear every single thing he's ever said about Sandy Hook. But you have to be able to question every event and all events. It's not wishing death on the families or encouraging people to go harass the families. But to say that like, oh, well, there's certain types of events we can't ever ask questions about because it's just not right to do. We got to be respectful of the people's emotions involved. It's like, well, I mean, tragedy of all types has people dealing with painful emotions. War, we can't criticize war because like some people died and we want to be respectful to them. It's a very convenient thing for the system to say, just keep your mouth shut because people's emotions are involved. Well, when aren't they? But what do you think about the Sandy Hook situation? How much of it was theater? I can't believe there was a real case in the court system that, said he was responsible for listeners' harassment. It doesn't really add up.
Yeah, it's I think it was all largely a scam as well. And it even goes to say like to warn people and say like, hey, if you ask these questions and you dig into these things, you could be the next person in $1 billion lawsuit.
Exactly.
And,
I got scared.
And it's one of those things where, I do think that the government and the powers that be do have power and influence, but I also don't think they're like this end all be all. They have like a contingency for every single thing. And I think they like to throw a lot of shit at the wall and see what sticks. And I think that when people started to buy into that Sandy Hook narrative and question people and things like that, they were like, well, wait a second, we got to pull this back in and reel this back in, because people are starting to question all school shootings and look at all like mass casualty events and things like that. And so I think it served them as sort of like in a multi-pronged way. And I'm in the camp that unless something is proven to be true, I always have to take it with a grain of salt. So I doubt things and I question that. I mean, it's just like with the 9/11 commission. It's like, did the government have a right? All those people died, and they want to do the investigations and check everything and stuff, but then when we want to do our own with a different event, then it's not okay. It doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I agree. And maybe we'll come back to some of this podcasting sponsor stuff and ad agencies and talent agencies. But I want to, while we're in the first hour still, let's fold in some bigger picture stuff. We've talked about Elon's dad before, but I wanted to read a little from your Technocracy thread. What is Technocracy? Is it something it is something that most mainstream media and alternative influencers aren't talking about. Doge is coming in to gut the government to install AI. Elon's grandfather was part of the original technocracy movement almost 100 years ago. Peter Thiel is a major driver behind all this and has been for over 20 years. Epstein was a staunch transhumanist and eugenicist. Cryptocurrency will play a major role in controlling everyone globally and will eventually be tied to energy credits. Carbon taxes are a precursor to this concept. And you talk about just all the influences. You say Israel is rooted in, and Jewish supremacy is rooted in Kabbalah and pushed through the Chabad Lubavitch sect. And again, no one can control what skin they're born into or family they're born into or religion. But if there is an elite within a certain sect that has agendas they don't advertise, that should be known. Like if we're in competition and we don't know it, well, we should know it, So that's kind of how I approach that. But you say they're in the ear of every major government, Trump, Zelensky, Putin, every politician. The CIA, FBI, DOJ, DHS, HHS, NIH, WHO, UN, NATO, and BRICS are all working in coordination with these other intelligence groups like Mossad and Unit 8200 to create this digital dystopia, and the people applauding MAGA are not ready for the level of tyranny that will come with it. And you go on to talk about their endgame model. Help flesh out that for people. What is the endgame model here?
Yeah. So I think that there is sort of a end goal that they're pacing towards, where they're working on revitalizing like the nuclear infrastructure. So we're slowly starting to see like big tech is buying up nuclear energy. They're using these to sort of power their AI data centers. You have like Bill Gates just bought 3 Mile Island last year, which is insane, like as a headline in and of itself. You have like Google is doing the same thing. Amazon is buying nuclear reactors in places like Hanford. Mark Zuckerberg has talked about getting nuclear energy. Elon's expressed interest in nuclear power, and they're going to use these to run the AI data centers. When the H-1B visa thing happened last year during Christmas, the Vivek and Elon fiasco that ended up getting Vivek removed, I ended up doing some digging, and I found that there's a plethora of data centers all throughout the U.S. There's over like 500, 600, 700 maybe now in Virginia alone. And there's correlation with the H-1B visas and how many are getting, dispersed per state. And it sort of lines up with the data center stuff. But that's sort of what got my eyes on it. And you can look up datacentermap.com and see like bubbles of where all the data centers are. And essentially they're projecting that they're going to have a 5x power consumption increase in the next 5 years, from what we thought it was going to be 5 years ago. And 90% of it roughly is going to be used to power these data centers. So like big tech, as though they didn't have enough, they're installing all these data centers. They're launching satellites into space. Elon has already launched over 1,000 Starlink satellites this year. And they're talking about creating like the Golden Dome and things like that. So they're going to have satellites that are spying on you constantly, that are interacting with like cell network towers, and 5, eventually 6G, to create like this sort of layered connectivity and basically connect all of the data centers up to these. We're starting to see this a lot with like Project Stargate and the infrastructure spending that's going on there. But then you also have like the technological military part of it. So this is sort of the arm where you have like the Optimus robots and the Palantir drones and the the constant surveilling from the Palantir AI, and Palantir AI getting injected into government. So they're like constantly watching everything and updating everything. Eventually humans are going to be phased out of the military, and they're just going to be using robotics largely. I believe the Denver police had Colorado's first police robot dog released in Denver this year. There's a video about that. And then you have like the global human computing grid, so chips in everyone's brains, or the WBAN, the Internet of Bodies, being always connected to those satellites. That's sort of why Elon is doing the Starlink and activating everything, saying he's connecting people and bringing people to the internet. Really, it's just so you don't have a place to hide. And then obviously like AI, quantum computing, and huge compute centers and stuff. I think Elon just said that he's going to be building the world's largest supercomputer. I think yesterday or the day before. And then all of this is basically going to be run by an energy certificate system that is powered by a cryptocurrency, whether that's going to be like stable coins or Bitcoin. I think it's really just going to be a mix of everything. And instead of using like the US dollar, we're going to be using something based on the amount of carbon we produce or the amount of energy that we consume with all of our transactions. We have people like Larry Fink saying, he wants to tokenize everything, start with stocks and bonds. We have digital ID, carbon taxes. We're doing the Bitcoin strategic reserve or the crypto strategic reserve. And when you sort of put all these things like on a map, it creates this zero leak like control system where everything's handled digitally. It's automated. All of your actions are sort of looked at it through this pre-crime view. There's no way to disconnect from the internet. It's embedded directly in your head, and it's all being powered by like infinite energy sources. So it's a lot, but that's sort of what I see us going towards.
Yeah, and sometimes with these sorts of claims, people say, oh, come on. They roll their eyes, and it seems like it's a tough sell to be putting a chip in people's brains. I agree, it's a tough sell, but you already have the one in your pocket, and they'll probably let that be plan B for the people who won't do it the other way. Well, it's already in your pocket. Good luck going somewhere without your phone. But yeah, I have some notes here about the data centers because, like you say, with the energy, I remember doing interviews a few years ago, and the point that Bill Gates was buying nuclear energy was this big thing. And he was, really funding this stuff. And there was the thought that they were going to wind down oil and gas, and it was all part of the climate change, green energy thing. And now it's like, no, I actually don't think that was the right read. I think you're more on the mark with this data center thing. They need these energy sources to run all this tech. My notes here say, when it comes to the data center, over the past 2 years, the 5-year load growth forecast has increased by a factor of 5, like you said, from 23 gigawatts to 128, including Grid Strategies' estimate for recent upload reports. The official nationwide forecast of electricity demand shot up from 2.8% to 8.2% growth over the next 5 years. That's a lot.
Yeah.
So they're clearly planning for something that is a huge level jump. And I wonder about the health effects of living in this EMF soup. We already have a lot of people sounding the alarm that our current electrified environment isn't safe. I can't imagine this is, but there's also the argument people have said that, and again, I think the brain chip is a tough sell, but imagine people who have a fully natural biology actually not feeling very good in this environment. And then they sell you something. It's like, well, if you just get this chip or something, then all the nausea will go away. Again, we're talking about supervillain, Bond villain type of stuff. It's a little hard to imagine getting from here to there, but information like this data center report, this is clearly for some reason. And I think you're nailing it.
Yeah, no, a lot of people try to tell me like, oh, they're not going to do the brain chips. That they've already got the W-band stuff going. They've already got the nanobots and the nanotech going. And I'm like, yeah, but they have market values for these things. And they wouldn't just assign, like a close to $10 billion market value on something that they don't foresee being an actual product. So I think they're, again, throwing shit at the wall, seeing what sticks. If they can't inject it into you, they're going to try to install it into you. And if not, they've got you on the smartphone. So I think you're right on the money there. And
Elon said in a Joe Rogan interview, he's supposed to be this genius. The more he talks, the more that whole character melts away. But he said, if you were smart, any person would just go take out a huge bank loan, get a Neuralink implant, and then your productivity is going to go up so much that you can pay off your loan and then some.
Yeah.
And it's like, do you realize how regular people's jobs work? Increasing your productivity by 5 times does not increase your paycheck by 5 times usually. It just gets you an attaboy. And most people's jobs, you're expected to be at maximum output. And if you increase that, there's no extra reward. So I don't know what he's talking about. It was just a terrible case to make. And just like, oh, you're going to get all this extra money and then you pay off your Neuralink.
Yeah.
Not the best sales pitch.
Yeah. Well, he's also coming from like an engineering perspective. It's like, just because you can think faster doesn't mean you can do more. Like you're still physically limited to what you can get done with your body.
Yes. Good points. And then I wanted to also just hit that H-1B visa thing again. You say Elon and co. aren't importing immigrants to take your job. They're hoping to automate your job and have an employee they can pay pennies to clear error codes and write scripts. Google, Amazon, Microsoft, BlackRock, Fidelity, Sequoia, and more are all backing this completely. Elon will step into a government position and get an unforetold amount of power. I did some digging on all the data centers in the US and found that there is a pattern with the H-1B visas being distributed last year. You mentioned this pattern, but I just wanted to hit it again because you do overlay the map of where the data centers are with where the most H-1B visas are, and the 3 highest offending states being California, 289 data centers, over 100,000 visas. Texas, 296 data centers, 77,000 visas of this type. New York, 132 data centers and 43,000 visas of this type. So, yeah, this is just so eye-opening to me because a lot of people are worried about AI taking the jobs and these immigrants taking the jobs, whatever. Everybody has their boogeyman they're afraid of, but this is how they combine. This is how the lock and the key gets put in. It's like, yeah, they want, it's a stereotype of Indians run the data centers, but like Vivek is Indian and he's promoting like, yeah, we need to get these people over here. And it's like, because the jobs are going to be replaced by AI and you just need a guy at the data center to clear those error codes, as you say. It really is a lot of clarity is added in knowing about this information and adding it to the pile when it comes to the technocracy concerns in general. These details just make it a lot more clear.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you dig down into it too, like I'd noticed that there was sort of this rhetoric that like H-1B visa work is cheap and then it's saving us money, yada, yada, yada. I went and looked and like the median income for a lot of these are like in California alone, one of the highest offenders, as you had pointed out there, their median income was like $154,000 a year. And Texas was $114,000 a year last year. And that's just the median income. So there's people that are making even more than that. And that's all coming from, our taxpayer dollars. And so we're basically building the digital prison and it's getting outsourced to people that don't even live here.
Yeah. And what are your thoughts about the population in general? Obviously, the elite are always saying we're overpopulated, but Elon says we're underpopulated, and people are worried about a death spiral of not having enough people to replace the boomers. And I don't know, it's weird because in the Genius bill, or in the Big Beautiful bill, I should say, they have the little thing about $1,000 investment for kids born, that'll compound till they're 18. And some of those ideas are really interesting. It's kind of a flip on Social Security. It's like a right-wing version of it, but it shows people the value of compound interest from the day you're born. That is interesting. I like the idea of setting people up for success like that when their parents might not be able to, but it's also an incentive to have more children. Trump's always like, we got to have more kids. And sometimes it's framed as just a race thing. Like they're trying to make sure there's more white people here. I'm trying not to step in it, but these are just the ideas that people talk about. And on one hand, if you're going to do all this AI stuff and there's not going to be jobs for people, that is a concern. But do we need more people?
Yeah.
It just seems like they're giving us two different stories about population and either growth or reduction. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think that they are very enamored with the idea of drastically reducing the population. I think that's, why we got things like vaccines. I think that's why they poison the food, the air, the water. I think that's why we have the EMF radiation. I think that's why big pharma is as structured the way that it is. And I think Elon is one of those. I think he's doing sort of a revelation of the method, and the fact that he does actually secretly want the population to decline. But he's raising this alarm of like, hey, look, the population is going. It's very much like how the WEF says, hey, we're going to be doing these things in 10 years. And then 10 years later, when the things happen, and they're like, well, we told you what we were doing, sort of like manufacturing that consent. And I think that, especially with like the technocratic stuff, there's a huge overlap of like transhumanist ideologies as well. I don't think that Elon being closely associated with things like IVF are like a coincidence. I think that you can go look at like the FDA and CDC and see that they're actually contemplating releasing things like artificial wombs, and the talks of like growing people in tanks basically. And I think what we'll see, and this is like a far offshoot, maybe 50, 100 years, I might be dead. But I think eventually, like being able to give birth and have children is going to be like a right or a privilege.
Yeah.
That they're going to have, and it's going to sort of incentivize people like they've already done it now, where they try to incentivize people with very like temporary band-aid things of like, hey, don't have kids, you can live a long full life, do whatever you want all the time. But I do secretly think that they do want the population reduced, because that just means there's more, it's more easily controlled if there's less of us. So
Right. And just to say, well, we want more families out there. We want more couples having babies. That's just red meat for a lot of right-wing, conservative, religious folks in the Midwest. They're like, yeah, that we're doing God's work here. But yeah, it's going to get really crazy. And I do agree with you that it seems like they're trying to make the natural ability to have kids. They're trying to eradicate that through terrible diets and all this stuff. You see the microplastic stories. They're shrinking the taints. It's hurting people's fertility rates. And it's not an accident. I actually thought it was really interesting to hear about this. Like, it's probably worth a whole show on the recycling conspiracy. But there was emails that got leaked from the people. I guess they might not have been emails. They might have been just letters at the time. But when we were sold plastic everything, they also came out with the campaign of recycling, and there's documents now that show that they knew that recycling was kind of a lie. They knew that it couldn't be as effective and efficient as it was claimed to be, that it itself would pollute, that you're not really going to be able to separate the plastic containers from all the food particles and stuff that is in them. And they just were like, who cares? Just tell people, like, we know you're concerned about all the trash, but don't worry, just recycle, reduce, reuse, recycle, put it in a Berenstain Bears book. These people are dumb. They won't figure it out. And now here we are with a big plastic island floating in the ocean, and it's ubiquitous everywhere. I just read that we have about a plastic spoon's worth of plastic in our brain. That can't be good. Huge problem. Like, when you take into account the crimes that people have committed on a mass scale, the plastic people should not be overlooked. They really should be pretty high on that totem pole.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the plastic industry, especially the fact that like, it's considered like forever. And you said it, they've seen how it leads to like infertility issues. It's leading to health issues. I mean, there's newborns that are babies in wombs that already have microplastics in their body. And it's like, who are we supposed to hold responsible for this? Because it's like everywhere I look, everything's in plastic, from the food to every product that I buy. And it's all coming from the oil industry, but it's also a two-part thing where it's like that they're also just using the climate hoax to fight the plastic industry, and that's basically like the only opposition. So it's like two warring psyops against each other, and we're supposed to pick one side, but both of them are bad for us.
Yeah, I know that game. And it's tough with two young kids because you go to a restaurant and, of course, the adults are served in glass and you can't give glass to a 3-year-old. So they bring out the plastic cup and the plastic straw. And it's like, damn, I don't like this. And it's happening again and again. And at home, we have stainless steel cups for them and stainless steel trays. It looks like they're in prison to the rest of our family. They're like, man, give these kids something with a smiley face on it. But it's like, that's all plastic and paint.
Yeah.
Should that all be going through the dishwasher? It's crazy. I drive myself nuts thinking about all those poisons and my kids. But then I think, hey, I lived in a pretty poisonous environment. I'm okay. We all made it through. The 80s and 90s were no cakewalk when it comes to toxic chemicals and food additives and food colorings. And here we all are.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It's, I've been doing my best to deplastify my kitchen over the last couple of years. I think mason jars have become my best friend.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Awesome stuff.
Yes. So let's jump over to talent agencies. So this is another one of these areas where you can coordinate and concentrate, bottleneck basically all the stuff that's coming and going. You have not only with the marketing, there's only a couple of podcast marketing agencies that everyone uses as a liaison to the products, but talent agencies as well. And I thought this was interesting. You covered one called MN2S that seems a bit fishy. You refer to them as possibly an intelligence cutout. They represent Peter Thiel, Alex Jones, Elon Musk, Bill Clinton, a ton of others, both sides of the aisle. You write, in the vast and often opaque world of entertainment, the faces we see on stage are rarely the ones pulling the strings. Behind the curtain lies a labyrinth of contracts, gatekeeping, and silent stakeholders, entities that not only shape the careers of celebrities, but also the cultural and political narratives we consume. Talk to us about this particular talent agency. Why did they stick out to you compared to all the others?
Yeah, so I was doing some digging into the Mike Flynn network, and I was looking into Jack Posobiec specifically. And with my show Liza Ties, I sort of open it up to everyone to say like, hey, if there's a lead that we can look at or something, if you want to drop a source, then I'll go take a look. We'll investigate and verify together. And someone dropped this MN2S thing with Jack Posobiec's profile, so I went to go look. And it pulled up, and it's it looks like a pretty cut of the mill. I believe I ended up doing some more digging, and it's all just built in like WordPress. So it's just a WordPress website. And I mean they have links for Alex Jones, Peter Thiel, Elon Musk, Bill Clinton, and various other people. Now, they all say that they are the contact or the booking agent is the Sharon Elkabas guy. And there's not a whole lot about him. And essentially this MN2S started as like a DJ PR company, and they've represented other artists like legitimately in the past. And I believe it was Fat Man Scoops was the last time they did like an official release as a PR company, because while they were representing him, he ended up dying on his tour. But they claim to work with like Coca-Cola and YouTube and Netflix and Kellogg's and Nike and Amazon and different things like that. And I am very tempted to try to place both a booking for a talent myself and also pretend to be a talent looking for an agency, and calling this Sharon guy and seeing what happens. Because I mean, to me, it seems very irresponsible to claim to represent all these things and have this big prominent website and have like no associations. So either this is a huge scam that's being run, or you can literally just contract out political voices for money. And so either way, I mean, it's really, really shady. The company's been around for about 30 plus years now. So it seems like a weird direction for them to take.
Yeah, it's interesting how some things just rise to the top. This little DJ agency is now booking ex-presidents and the richest man in the world. I mean, this isn't nothing. But man, as we're getting close to the end of this thing, I wanted to wrap a bow around the major themes today. And I want you to maybe lay out a roadmap of how you see this stuff going, how long you think it will take to implement. How do you see it actually affecting the average person over the next 10 or 20 years?
So I think these next few years, they've kind of started to step on the gas a little bit. Knowing everything that I've known, I've even been surprised at some of the things that have already come out and have been developed, like the patient registration that you can now do for Neuralink, both in the US and the UK. I think in the next few years, we're going to slowly start seeing more and more people sign up for that, claiming that it has changed their life and, ailed pain or cured some disease or some ailment that they've had, and then it's going to be this big medical breakthrough. You're going to have tons of people sign up for that. I think that slowly Elon's going to launch enough satellites to cover the Earth, and we're going to have no area on the planet that has no internet connectivity. You might be able to go down into like some caves or something like that. We're going to see a revitalization of the American nuclear industry. I think in the next few years, they are going to have, like Google nuclear reactor with like their branding on it and everything like that. I do foresee some sort of devastation within the U.S. market to crash the dollar, to give us some sort of reason to move over to like stable coins, Bitcoin, and what have you. It could even be like the in the Fed movement, I think has largely been co-opted by the technocrats so that they can remove the Federal Reserve and then create this world digital economy. So again, gets you in that like catch 22. There's going to be more vaccines that are coming. I think AI is going to completely revolutionize the medical industry for the worse. You have the NIH director, Jay Bhattacharya, who's really good friends with Peter Thiel. You have RFK Jr., who's basically bending over backwards to give the vaccines and the technocrats and all of them everything that they want. You have Trump with Operation Stargate, Larry Ellison talking about like cancer vaccines. The CDC director is from DARPA, and she's talked about AI in health. So I think that we're seeing like a huge biotechnical push to integrate people with technology so that whether it's a wearable, a smartphone, a chip, a shot, whatever that looks like, will eventually be pushed onto you to the point where if you don't have it, you can't transact within society. And that's through like the crypto systems and, the carbon tax credit system and things like that. And so I would say that within the next 5 years, we're probably going to get to the point where there is some sort of digital version of the US dollar. I think that we are slowly starting to see that with like the changes from Social Security payments now being automated and digitized. We're going to slowly see like this UBI come, and it's going to be digital only. We're seeing AI in like Medicare, Medicaid. So AI is basically taking over everything. Elon Musk, Peter Thiel, Alex Karp, all these big technocrats, they're sort of running it. They're partnering with, people like Benjamin Netanyahu in Israel, who has no hesitation to like spy on the world and blackmail. All these people were aligned with Jeffrey Epstein. They're all aligned with the Chabad Lubavitch sect. They all have like the black hats backing them. And I think that, in the very near future, we're going to see a stark increase in like cancer rates, and they're going to use that to push a cancer vaccine like Larry Ellison was talking about. And I think it's going to come from all the EMF, from all the data centers and satellites and spying and the brain chips and things. And Ray Kurzweil put it best that human singularity is supposed to happen by 2045. So I would say that that's as far as where we're going. If people don't wake up and say like, hey, stop putting shit in and on my body, I think we're pacing for that.
Yeah. Sadly, I gave up on mass change a long time ago, and it's more about the individual, and you can separate yourself and your family from a lot of this stuff. And farming's the new punk rock. I just like that phrase. But I'm with you on the roadmap. It does seem like you can see the ship has been steered in these directions. The road is long, but that's the road we're on. I just think that the hardest sell is things under the skin. I don't know if they're going to get that. They can get it on the wrist, they can get it in the pocket, under the skin. And there's some dumb people out there, I guess, but you're going to have to subsidize that. You're going to have to, maybe if people have zero opportunity and you say, hey, get this chip and we will place you within this company because we know the value of the thing. Yeah, you're going to have to incentivize it hard, but I just can't imagine it. But crazier things have happened.
Yeah.
So what's next for you? What are the investigations you're working on now or will be working on next? Where can people keep up with you? I would say you got to check out 7C's Twitter threads. They're incredible, and I'm hoping we're going to put some of the images of the deep dive webs up on the screen behind me. But yeah, tell us what you're working on next and give them your links.
Yeah. So currently I'm sort of working on the Jordan Peterson ARC network, just because I do think it's worth mapping out, especially for the University of Austin stuff. And then the Michael Flynn network, because in my opinion, the biggest thing that's sort of still keeping people endeared to Donald Trump and the whole like savior thing is the Q psyop that happened, and I think that a lot of that is being run by Michael Flynn and his cohorts. So I'm digging into them and everything that they sort of touch. That unfortunately branches out into a lot of things, like Christian nationalism, biotech, the Michael Schellenberger stuff, a lot of stuff in the Trump web. But I do think that there's something there, and eventually with enough piecing together can prove that it was like an IARPA thing. And that's sort of what I'm working towards. As far as where to find me, you can find me on Twitter, YouTube, Rumble, or I guess it's X now. I still just call it Twitter. And then Substack. I'm starting to write articles and stuff, and I actually have something coming out here very soon about how they will take people, send them to like Latin America, Central America, under like CIA training to come back and be like PR people, or like manipulate public perception here, and sort of a trend that I've seen with a lot of big wig PR guys that are doing that these days.
Man. Yeah, lots of weird stuff going on. I heard about Israel gets a lot of attention, but the PayPal mafia is largely the South African contingency, this little cabal. Yeah. And all of a sudden we're importing people from South Africa. It's like a lot of people have unadvertised interests and desires, and that's just the name of the game. But this was a lot of fun despite the darkness. I consider you a very practical, logical, no-nonsense researcher, but we did get to tiptoe into the weird stuff, which I do appreciate. Oh, yeah. And I hope people check out your work. It is impressive. Thanks for taking the time, and take care.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This was an excellent opportunity. Huge fan of the show, and happy to be back anytime.
Heck yeah. And boom goes the dynamite, people. 7C's a great researcher. He really does an excellent job with those crazy detailed graphs. I threw a couple of them up on the screen to try to show you what they look like, but I know that it's hard to display every little nuance that you can actually see because they're just so wide and so detailed. But go to his Twitter. You can get the full scope of it, dive in deeper. I just wanted to give you a sense of it. We have the video now. If not for this, why would we use it for anything else? So really good. Super enjoyed it. For these first 5 or so, at least, I really wanted to give you unique off-the-radar people that you haven't heard from for the launch of the video. And of course, I recorded a couple of these weeks in advance because I had to make sure the studio was going to work before I signed the deal and all this. And Sam Tripoli, he dropped an interview with 7C's, I think, yesterday. So he beat me to it. I took the risk of holding on to it for a couple of weeks, and here we are. And the information about Palantir and Doge, I mean, some of it may be a couple weeks outdated, but Palantir news is certainly fresh. Now that they're feuding, Elon and Trump, it just seems like the football was passed from one PayPal co-owner to another. Funny enough, I did just hear on No Agenda, they had a listener write in who said that he had an interview at Palantir and that they really don't have the data sets that people think they have, and they haven't even really been able to train their AI models because they don't have the data to train on. Okay, I mean, this guy went to an interview when? Was it before or after Elon got all the data from all the places during the Doge situation? So I would say they probably have it now, and these AI models seem to get trained quite quickly. So I'm not really worried about them being behind. I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's overblown the way this guy was suggesting it's overblown. The CIA, I was just reading, funded Palantir from the ground up. So Elon and Peter Thiel made this money from the PayPal sale to eBay, of all places, I believe. And then when Peter Thiel started Palantir, the first investor was In-Q-Tel, and that is a CIA company. I actually Googled that because I didn't want it just to be speculation. I wanted to see how true it was. And yeah, the Washington Post even said In-Q-Tel started as the idea of then CIA Director George Tenet. So obviously, it's easy to get government contracts when you are the government. And they have a subdivision called Gotham that compartmentalizes the government data projects. Such cringy names. All these pop culture references. What happened to good old fashioned, esoteric, Babylonian symbolism and references to the old gods? A lot of great info, though. I think this is the name of the game when it comes to what this country is going to look like in a couple of years. You got to watch the Technocracy. That's just in big, bold, flashing lights, the main event. And I thought the information about the work visas was really telling too. It's not that they want to bring in immigrants to replace the workers. The AI is going to replace the workers. They just need a guy in the IT booth. And then, of course, you know that I liked throwing a little shade at the podcast sponsors that are big in this field. And I can't say THC will never, ever have ads. Just the world is so volatile right now. I got to at least keep the door cracked open. I will do everything I can in my power first. And yeah, the influence is a thing, but honestly, just as a listener of shows, I just hate to see those interruptions pop up. When a guest is on a roll, it just ruins the flow of the show. You make this great show and then you fill it with this stuff. I just don't like it from a format perspective, really. And I am spiteful of the fact that it's the only way content gets made. It really is. Like, TV was always ad revenue based, and movies were always you paid to go to the theater. So I'm trying to do it more that way. We pay to get the content we like, and we leave advertisers out of it. Of course, movies didn't really leave advertisers out of it, but I'm trying here. And yes, the irony is not lost on me that for a guy who says he hates how much time ads take up in content, I'm spending a lot of time in this content recently talking about ads and not even running them. So that's probably even worse, but it was relevant today. I think it deserves at least a mention. And I'm glad I could just have a conversation with Seven Seas about the totality of his work without worrying about any awkward conflicts of interest or anything like that. Obviously, audiences have to decide how much that stuff matters to them. Based on the numbers, it seems to be not at all. But I'm going to give myself a pat on the back today, at least. In the second hour, we went deeper on some individual people and individual companies. We got Seven C's take on why he doesn't trust the wellness company, thinks something's up there. We got a little bit into Ian Carroll. A lot of people have feelings about that guy. You know, I like to stay pretty neutral on stuff like that, but Seven C's has done some research and he found some stuff that was worth mentioning, especially regarding the two guys that Ian Carroll's doing a podcast with. Also in the Plus show, the wellness company conversation spiraled out into, well, what do you think about Big Pharma and just the whole virus paradigm in general? And then I just kind of picked his brain about various parts of the new conspiracy canon, dinosaurs, and a lot of interesting things. So I am glad that I got a little bit of a segue to talk about Nicole Shanahan and the Dr. Jack Kruse thing, because I just find that saga very interesting. And Dr. Jack Kruse talking about the big conspiracy being blue light coming from all of our devices, that this was weaponized. He has a video that I saw the other day where he talks about how they found out they could use various signals to manipulate the minds of bulls. When the matadors were fighting the bulls, they could get them to stop, turn around, do all this stuff. And it was all wired into their brain. And so then the next step was, well, can this be done wirelessly? Can we manipulate the mind, make them more docile wirelessly? Yeah, they could. And it was with blue light. And then, surprise, blue light is emitting from all of our devices. That is something that goes so under the radar. Dr. Jack Kruse is one of the few people highlighting it every time he talks. And he says it's more important than diet. And it very well could be, but it's a much bigger addiction than my diet. I can stop eating ice cream more than I can stop all screen usage. Sorry. That's just how it goes sometimes, right? We want to believe the things that are hardest for us to give up are less damaging than advertised, and we might put the blame somewhere else. Luckily, in our situation, or unfortunately, there's a lot of places to shift the blame. We can say, hey, cigarettes kill a lot of people. Thankfully, I don't smoke cigarettes. Or we can look over at seed oils and be like, man, it's probably all those seed oils. Can't be the blue light from the screens I'm constantly staring into. And maybe it is seed oils. I really don't know. There's now a lot of people saying that this seed oil blame might actually be a scapegoat for vaccine damage or blue light and working under these fluorescents, because this has happened before, right? They shifted the blame from sugar and said it was all cholesterol. And maybe this is the same old trick, throwing all the shade at seed oils, when really it's not the seed oils themselves. It might be the raw materials that are used, being soaked in glyphosate and then turned into oils, that are the real problem. So it might just be the poison on the plant. Who could have ever figured that out? Who really knows, though? These are just some of the things I've been reading lately that make logical sense to me. But sign up for Plus if you want twice as much show. Now is the time, while we're still in that month where all Plus members are getting the video. But in higher side news, got a lot of compliments on the video. A lot of positive feedback. Very little grumbling at all. People seem to be pretty optimistic, and they enjoyed it, and they're happy about this trajectory. So all good. There was one issue where people couldn't figure out how to cast the video because I said you could. Well, that was on me. In the options and the back end, there is a toggle for that. So I switched it on, and now you will see the cast button right there in the video, and you can throw it up on the TV. We're also working on that thing I mentioned where we will email a link that has your login info encoded into it. So you click it, boom, and you should be able to watch the video that way. That cuts down on the friction. But we now got 2 in the bag, fully released, and I know what's in the pipeline, so I'm excited. I think you'll like it. When it comes to The Last Show with Chris, I just scoped out the rating. It got a 4.9. Wow. I guess that was a good strategic choice to start off with Lucifer's Technologies. It is some of my favorite material of Chris's. While everybody is saying spaceship crash in the desert, Chris is saying ritual, and I think Chris will be vindicated with time. I don't know if the rating is completely content related or if it's also just the excitement of video, or some people just wanted to give me an attaboy for making a difficult change that puts more pressure on me. But either way, I appreciate it. If you're liking the show, I'm liking the show, and it's just a win-win all around. So awesome. All right, and the other thing we do around here is look at the meetup calendar. Let's see if anything's been added and just pump up the events that are here. So tomorrow, June 8th, we got 2. San Antonio, Texas, Halcyon Southtown, and the Trails Cafe in LA. I definitely would be interested in hearing how that goes. I know LA is a big place, but it's kind of popping off as far as I can tell as we speak. I think a guy just got hit by an ICE van because he wouldn't stop trying to stop a moving vehicle, and he hit his head and died. So prepare for an interesting week in LA. And then June 14th, we have the Lanesboro, Massachusetts Raw Milk Party. And June 28th, Orlando, Florida at Blue Jacket Park. People are meeting up. And then Eden Terrace, Auckland, New Zealand's coming around again. Gail Brath's Ale House in July on the 21st. I like it. There are meetups all across this great land, and just so you know, you can always hop on highersidemeetups.com, free and open to anyone. Make a local event, choose a local business. They get a little shout out to a larger audience. That's kind of cool. Free advertising for independent places, and then people will show up and you can talk to them about all this crazy stuff that we get into on THC, and know that some local people now think like you think, and you have someone to call when the next lockdown happens and everyone else is freaking out. Anyway, I think that is it for me. Check out 7C's work if you liked the things he had to say. The impressive graphs he has are worth taking a look at, and sign up for Plus if you want more of this show, a 15-year-long ad-free archive, or just want to show appreciation for a truly independent venture. Thanks for all the love and support. I'm so lucky to be able to do this, and this transition is going great, as awkward as I feel during parts of it, but I've done my part. Your move, Shady Podcast sponsors, new alt media agents, and Technocracy takeover tyrants. Your fucking move.
Once I found a smoking gun, but nobody else saw it. Once someone returned my money, but had stolen my wallet. Twice I was bitten, but I didn't get shy. I've been drinking from a cup that's always bone dry. You can still make out the web when the spider's not seen. You can connect the dots, just draw some lines in between. When you can smell the house burning, what more do you need? You can attribute to malice what goes deeper than greed. I broke a mirror right before the best 7 years of my life. I crossed the street and looked both ways, and I'm still gonna die. The flags fly at half-mast whenever it's my birthday. I notice when you leave a hit still burning in the ashtray. You can still make out the web when the spider's not seen. You can connect the dots, just draw some lines in between. When you can smell the house burning, what more do you need? You can attribute to malice what goes deeper than greed. Over your head, how can it be too deep? I don't like to cause confusion, if you know what I mean. I've seen the sun shine brightest on the darkest of days. A rich man once told me that's when the best deals are made. You can still make out the web when the spider's not seen. You can connect the dots, just draw some lines in between. When you can smell the house burning, what more do you need? You can attribute to malice what goes deeper than greed. You can still make out the web when the spider's not seen. You can connect the dots, just draw some lines in between. When you can smell the house burning, what more do you need? The higher side chats versus the machine.